Section 15a, the doctrine of no soul, Anatta continued. Question of free will. The question of free will has occupied an important place in Western thought and philosophy. But according to conditioned Genesis, this question does not and cannot arise in Buddhist philosophy. If the whole of existence is relative, conditioned, and interdependent, how can will alone be free? Will, which is included in the fourth aggregate, like any other thought, is conditioned. So-called freedom itself in this world is not absolutely free. That too is conditioned and relative. There is, of course, such a conditioned and relative free will, but not unconditioned and absolute. There can be nothing absolutely free in this world, physical or mental, as everything is conditioned and relative. If free will implies a will independent of conditions, independent of cause and effect, such a thing does not exist. How can a will, or anything for that matter, arise without conditions, away from cause and effect, when the whole of life, the whole of existence, is conditioned and relative? Here again, the idea of free will is basically connected with the idea of God, soul, justice, reward, and punishment. Not only so-called free will is not free, but even the very idea of free will is not free from conditions. According to the doctrine of conditioned Genesis, as well as according to the analysis of being into the five aggregates, the idea of an abiding, immortal substance in man or outside, whether it is called Atman, I, soul, self, or ego, is considered only a false belief, a mental projection. This is the Buddhist doctrine of Anatta, no soul or no self. Two kinds of truths. In order to avoid a confusion, it should be mentioned here that there are two kinds of truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. When we use such expressions in our daily life as I, you, being, individual, etc., we do not lie because there's no self or being as such, but we speak a truth conforming to the convention of the world. But the ultimate truth is that there is no I or being in reality. As the Mahayana Sutra Lankara says, a person should be mentioned as existing only in designation. That is, conventionally, there is a being, but not in reality. The negation of an imperishable Atman is the common characteristic of all dogmatic systems of the lesser as well as the great vehicle, and there is therefore no reason to assume that Buddhist tradition, which is in complete agreement on this point, has deviated from the Buddha's original teaching. Some erroneous views. It is therefore curious that recently there should have been a vain attempt by a few scholars to smuggle the idea of self into the teaching of the Buddha. Quite contrary to the spirit of Buddhism, these scholars respect, admire, and venerate the Buddha and his teachings. They look up to Buddhism, but they cannot imagine that the Buddha, whom they considered the most clear and profound thinker, could have denied the existence of an Atman or self which they needed so much. They unconsciously seek the support of the Buddha for this need for eternal existence. Of course, not in a petty individual self with small s, but in the big self with a capital S. It is better to say frankly that one believes in an Atman or self, or one may even say that the Buddha was totally wrong in denying the existence of an Atman. But certainly it will not do for anyone to try to introduce into Buddhism an idea which the Buddha never accepted, as far as we can see from the extant original texts. Religions which believe in God and soul make no secret of these two ideas. On the contrary, they proclaim them constantly and repeatedly in the most eloquent terms. If the Buddha had accepted these two ideas so important in all religions, he certainly would have declared them publicly, as he had spoken about other things, and would not have left them hidden to be discovered only 25 centuries after his death. People become nervous at the idea that through the Buddha's teaching of Anatta, the self they imagine they have is going to be destroyed. The Buddha was not unaware of this. A bhikkhu once asked him, "Sir, is there a case where one is tormented when something permanent within oneself is not found?" "Yes, bhikkhu, there is," answered the Buddha. "A man has the following view. The universe is that Atman, I shall be that after death, permanent, abiding, everlasting, unchanging, and I shall exist as such for eternity." He hears the Tathagata, or a disciple of his, preaching the doctrine, aiming at the complete destruction of all speculative views, aiming at the extinction of thirst, aiming at detachment, cessation, nirvana. I will be annihilated. I will be destroyed. I will be no more. So he mourns, worries himself, laments, weeps, beating his breast, and becomes bewildered. Thus, O bhikkhu, there is a case where one is tormented when something permanent within oneself is not found. Elsewhere, the Buddha says, "O bhikkhus, this idea that I may not be, I may not have, is frightening to the uninstructed worldling." Those who want to find a self in Buddhism argues as follows. It is true that the Buddha analyzes being into matter, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, and says that none of these things is self. But he does not say that there is no self at all in man or anywhere else apart from these aggregates. This position is untenable for two reasons. One is that, according to the Buddha's teaching, a being is composed only of these five aggregates and nothing more. Nowhere has he said that there was anything more than these five aggregates in a being. To be continued.